We're each here to express a different aspect of divinity. And we are to do that in all of the things that we do.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Goddess Hangs.
Episode 42.
Woo! I'm Sadie.
And I'm Juliet.
Obviously. And we created this podcast to make the world of mindset, manifestation, magic, spirituality more relatable and fun.
So fun.
We have an incredible guest today, Makhosi Nejeser, the Royal Shaman. We have been huge fans of hers for so long. We could not believe that she honored us with her presence for an entire hour. This interview is insane. She is a coach and guide for the top 2%, the elite. She helps them build euphoric empires. She's all about energetic alignment, abundance. She kept saying both and, like, you can have it all. She's all about it. And we talk so much about how to embody that here and now as we're all here, we're all goddesses ready to become the elite. We are the elite. So without further ado, here's our interview with the Royal Shaman, Makhosi. Hello, goddesses. We are so excited about our guest this week, Makhosi the Royal Shaman.
Welcome. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to dive in with both of you. And I know so many people are going to just get some magic from this.
Oh my gosh. We have been counting down the days, like a countdown to Christmas, to have you on the show. And we know that our listeners are just going to fall madly in love with you and gain so much wisdom, so much insights. I think where we sort of have to begin is, what is a shaman? What was your journey? How did that all unfold for you? Tell us everything.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to tell you everything because we would be here for like 3 days, but I will give you the Cliff Notes version.
Okay. That's fair.
So in short, a shaman is someone who serves as the bridge between the physical and the non-physical realm, in a variety of ways, in different gifting, but there are some key pillars in that. We are initiated to work with spirit, and usually it's going to be ancestors first and foremost. That's the bulk. But then also, depending on the person's gifting, there's different kinds of spirits that they might work with. So, for me, I work primarily with, I guess you could call it the element of ether. I work with spirits that can encompass everything. So really at this point, whatever I decide to use as medicine can become medicine. And my favorite is just using my voice, just enlightening and activating others using language, using frequency. I came onto this path after a lifelong seeking for really what I'm here for, who I really am. And it's almost like I was living dual lives. I was living one life that was focused on achievement, success, so on and so forth. And simultaneously, I was also living a more spiritual life where I was interacting with spirit in various ways. Also really exploring more philosophical things and psychology and the origins of humanity. And all of that kind of culminated after my son was born and I decided not to go to med school. When I began to just follow what my inner guidance was telling me. And there was like some traumatic stuff that happened. But the more that I leaned into that, the more that I was creating a life beyond what I could even have dreamed possible. And that ultimately took me into initiations in Africa. I spent about 5 years in the initiatic process, traveled to 5 different countries in Africa. And ultimately, I completed my ceremony in South Africa when I became what they call a Sangoma, or a Zulu Shaman. And so now, ever since then, I'm really here as like an African mystic, here to bring the truth and to, awaken consciousness and expand people into the abundance that is really waiting for them to just step into. So I am a person that's spiritual, but really grounded in practicality and real life. And how can you actually use spiritual wisdom to improve your relationships, to, create freedom in your life, to really create significance in a greater, more expansive way.
So just now I want to hear more about like the ways, some of the ways that we can do that, some of the ways that you are helping, guide and facilitate your clients in accessing the abundance.
Yeah. For my clients, the first step that we have to step into is a deconditioning process. Mm-hmm. So we live in a society that really glorifies more of the yang aspects of our nature, the action, the doing, the hustling, so on and so forth, which is very, very important, mind you. However, there is this other aspect, the yin aspect, which has been so devalued for over 2,000 years. And there's a lot of wisdom to be had there for all of us when we begin incorporating this into our lives. So my favorite way is really to invite my clients to explore that which is uncomfortable, that which is the point of discomfort or resistance, because that is where the gold is. That's where our higher self is bumping up against a limiting belief, or the way I like to say it, a limiting identity that it's trying to dissolve so that we can receive more of that abundance in whatever form it might take.
What would you say is maybe the most common limiting identity that, people are running up against at this time? Or is there one that sort of seems to be ubiquitous amongst different people, or what is there one?
Yeah. So, there's quite a few, but one of them that I see prevalent a lot right now is the people pleaser. Mm. And from a very young age, we're taught, we're conditioned that it's good to make our parents happy. It's good to, cater to what our teacher wants from us. And we get rewarded for that and punished when we don't follow what other people want from us. And so I see so many people, even my elite level clients, struggle with people pleasing, saying yes to all the things, or even approaching, I work with entrepreneurs a ton, and they even approach their business from the place of, I just want to help people. I just want to serve, so on and so forth. And this is one of the ways that our ego, our identity, hijacks us off of our path. And so I promote that we look at how can we actually divine selfishness, meaning that we are actually doing what is in the highest good for us, knowing that that's going to be in the highest good for everyone. So that means that we actually have to look at, sometimes we want things that would typically be called selfish, and those actually can be beautiful things that we want. And also the opposite can be true, that sometimes we pursue things that other people will say are like amazing. For example, let's say you want to get a fabulous car. Most of us want to have a fabulous car, right? And so let's say that you are so focused on getting this car that you neglect what it is that you actually want from having the car. Well, if you just focus on what it is that you truly desire from that experience and start creating that now, that is actually beneficial to others. It might even draw in the car. That happens a lot. But it doesn't become about the external thing. We get divinely selfish about what is the experience, what is the feeling that we want to have in our day-to-day lives, and operate from that place. And then just how do I share more of that, instead of how do I serve these people? How do I make a bigger impact, without really checking in with what's going on inside? What do I really desire?
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. Like, what if you just keep pouring into your own cup and let it overflow into everyone's, rather than like trying to pour out of this half empty cup that you're frantically trying to refill? It's like scarcity versus abundance, and you're taking care of your own energy.
I love that. Divinely selfish. Divine selfishness. It's such a different spin on that word, and I love it. And it's like, it is important to take care of yourself. And I think the more that we do that, and the more we show up energized, fulfilled, feeling free, feeling happy, like we then are just like, our energy is serving people without us even saying a word sometimes. That's so beautiful.
I love it.
Oh my gosh. So I have to ask, this will tie in, but you seem to be an expert on ancestors, ancestral DNA, ancestral trauma, ancestry, all of ancestry.com. No. And so I want to ask how our ancestry and our ancestors, how does that tie into our maybe identities or our beliefs about abundance, or like how does that all tie in?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So there's so many different ways that we can go with this, but I'm going to keep it in like the most practical and even a little scientific way possible. So very often we can get very caught up in the more esoteric, that we avoid just literally what we can see with our own two eyes. So we can literally see with our own eyes that there is no physical aspect of us that is just us. Like, I have a pretty distinct nose, but this is not my nose. You're looking at my father's nose, who got this from his father and on and on and on, right? So we have to first recognize that this skin, this body, these tissues, the DNA is inherited. And with that, some of the experiences that they had also were passed down. And that can be literally in the DNA, but also many of us were raised in environments as well with certain ways of dealing. So the truth is that reality just is, but we are the ones who we can have certain experiences and we perceive them as traumatic, and then they imprint our way of being. One of my favorite examples of this my great-grandmother, she only passed away a few years ago. I was so blessed to have both of my great-grandparents up until my late 20s. They were alive, and she lived through the Great Depression. And because of the Great Depression, she had to survive in a certain way. So she became super frugal. I mean, literally, there's Christmas wrapping paper still in the family house from like the 60s, because she would just reuse the wrapping paper, right? And that way of being was born to create survival in that time period. The problem happens when now we're continuing to perpetuate that way of being, and it's no longer fitting who we are trying to express in the world, what the time is calling for now. And sometimes we become attached to that identity, to that way of being in the world, as if it is us. Right? Like, I know so many people who are like, I'm frugal, or I'm, one of my favorites is like, I'm bougie, whatever it is for you. And the truth is that our identity is malleable. We can create ourselves. We just have to choose to take responsibility for it. And it is simultaneously a responsibility, but also a beautiful gift. So when I'm talking about ancestors, there's a spiritual component, but also it's very grounded in the now. I say, like, your ancestors are you in the past, and you are your ancestors right now. So whatever you're doing, whatever healing you're doing, whatever integrating you're doing right now is affecting them, and vice versa.
There's something that we talk about, how your ancestors want you to succeed and heal, because it sort of I shouldn't say goes back, but it heals.
Well, I think it goes on both ends of the timeline, because we believe in reincarnation, and that you're sort of reborn into the same soul family again and again. So it's like what I do now, the generational wealth I work to create, and the healing and the identities that I break down, that's my children and my grandchildren. That's me being reborn into that. So I'm helping myself and everyone, in spirit down the line, as well as what you're talking about, like healing back. I just love that idea.
I love that. And it feels so right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some ways that either you personally or you guide your clients to connect with their ancestors? Because I personally don't have a ritual where I do this. I'm definitely interested and curious what you have to say.
So I do work with my clients occasionally on this. It's included in my containers. I don't put a huge focus on it, because the truth is sometimes we love to like skip steps. And the most powerful piece that we have, I would say like about 70%, is us and our intuition, us and our own inner guidance, which also is like your ancestors are a part of that, right? And so I am a firm believer, because I've just seen it so many times, that someone can create incredible shifts just by starting with their higher self. Just, you and your higher self, magic. Then we start talking about ancestors and ancestral reverence, which is really a part of every traditional or ancient or indigenous spiritual system, because in the higher order of things, we see such a huge connection. We see that as being like the gatekeepers to the non-physical realm. And so starting a relationship with your ancestors can be just as simple as setting aside a glass of water, setting aside a small food offering right before you go to eat, and just speaking your intentions over that, speaking gratitude. Thank you for this amazing body that I have, loving it. Thank you for letting me borrow it.
Loving it.
Thank you for bringing these awesome, amazing friends and spouse and children and so on and so forth. Gratitude. And then also wishes of, what it is that you wish to see in your life. And I think sometimes we approach ancestors almost like as if they are a sky daddy. They're not. They really are looking out for what is for the highest good. And so whenever you do create wishes, I always keep in mind that you want to be speaking about wishes that are for the highest good and not be attached to what that might look like. So, instead of asking for, ancestors, I'm wishing for this amazing Lamborghini, so on and so forth. Instead, putting your wishes on, I'm so grateful for these 2 legs, and like we get to have both and I would really love to receive an incredible vehicle to help me create more wealth, or, to be able to travel back and forth to the doctor or whatever that is for you. But keeping in mind what is the higher good, and know that when you do that, everything that's in alignment for you is going to come into your life, and you'll always be taken care of.
I love that. Also, I think Sky Daddy is the funniest thing I've heard. And I'm picturing it like if you ever made a hat, I could say Sky Daddy. So you said there's like the 70%, the 30%. So let's route back to the 70%, the higher self. How can we access like our highest self, our highest truth, and how do we tell the difference between that and our ego?
Yeah. So for the most part, intuition is going to live in the body, whereas ego or identity or your personality lives more in the mind. It's a thinking process. More and more. So the way that you can really tell the difference between the two is, number one, ego is going to be focused on time, because it only exists because of time. And so it's always worried about rushing. It's worried about, doing things in a timely fashion. It's impatient, so on and so forth. And also it is going to try and talk you into doing the thing that's going to keep you safe and secure and connected, which oftentimes it's perceiving as keeping you small, really, is what that usually is. So whenever I'm guiding someone to begin tapping into their intuition, number one, recognize that intuition can come in a lot of different forms. It is not just one way. It's not just a gut instinct. It could be just a knowing. It could be signs. It could be synchronicities. It could be messages that literally just pop up. For some of us, it gets a little bit deeper than that. Like, it could be a voice, literally, right? Or the appearance of an entity can show up, and you can have some intuition about that. So when we understand that this aspect of us is timeless, it is much more patient. It's more calm. It doesn't have like an urgency to it. Because it lives forever, it's not going to rush you, because it's almost like, well, we could like, even if this kills us, we could come back So here's the nudge. Are you going to get it or not? And so it's a very subtle thing. And so we have to practice it. And I always invite people to just start with very simple things. I love food. So I start with food for a lot of people, unless you have, if you have prior history of challenges with food, maybe don't start with that one. But allowing yourself to intuit what it is that your body needs from you, and then actually act on it. And then begin paying attention to how that made you feel. Even if it was like, oh, well, it's time to eat, and my body's actually not hungry right now. I'm just not going to eat right now, because that's what my body's calling for. And then oh, actually, maybe I feel a little bit more energized and I didn't need to eat right then. Or maybe it was, asking for, I don't know, I was on a burger kick for like 2 months. Literally, I was eating burgers 3 times a week. And finally I told my doctor about it, and she said, oh, well, what you're going through right now is I've been in this intense detox protocol. She was like, what actually is happening is your body needs the nutrients from that. And here, let's get you some organ meats so that you can get those nutrients in a denser way. So I went and got burgers made with like these organ meats. And once I did it, I stopped craving it so much. So it's something we have to be really mindful of. It's getting mindful. It's getting present to what is actually showing up in my life right now. And then knowing that everything comes in divine timing. We have a ton of power to create, but we also want to honor divine timing.
When you talk about the higher self and listening to your body and listening to your intuition, I heard a little snippet of you talking today on a separate interview about, I think it was called calling sickness, and what can sort of happen in your body when you're not listening to your higher self, when you're sort of pushing it down. And I want to know as much as you want to share about that.
Yes. So it's interesting because there are themes that we experience as human beings, and in varying degrees. So typically a shaman knows that they're called traditionally in the tribe, because they would have what's called the calling sickness. And there are specific issues that pop up in the body and also mentally when this person is not aligned with their higher calling. And it ultimately becomes so bad that no doctors can really diagnose it. And it forces them essentially to explore things that before they probably would not have even considered. They have to, go to the far edges. But I'm going to say that in some ways, the vast majority of humanity, at least in the West, is experiencing a form of calling sickness, in that if we look at the kind of health problems that we have every year increasing, yes, we can put some blame on pollution and chemicals and the way that we eat and how we don't exercise. But all of those are actually just symptoms or manifestation of a deeper rooted problem. And that problem is that each of us is here for a calling or a quote unquote purpose, but I'm going to say it in a different way, that each of us is really here to express a different aspect of divinity.
Oh, I love that.
We're each here to express a different aspect of divinity. And we are to do that in all of the things that we do. Purpose is not a goal. You don't need to find a purpose. It's actually in this moment right now. How is your higher self trying to express itself? And are you suppressing that? Or are you allowing that to be emitted through your being? When we allow for that to happen, we can step into alignment. Our bodies begin to heal themselves. Our mental states shift. We're no longer suffering from anxiety and depression, and our weight goes to a great equilibrium for you. You no longer find yourself being controlled by cravings for things that are actually self-destructive for you, like honey buns and, all of those sorts of things. And you begin to actually experience what freedom actually is. Freedom is not something that we get when we have the money and or the time. Freedom is when we're allowing ourselves to be that fully expressed version of aspect of divinity without resistance.
Ooh.
Ooh, I know. We've talked about this before, like our own experiences of just the more we've honored our desires, which we talk about that. Like, I think our purpose is to honor our desires, follow those breadcrumbs to the bigger things that are meant for us. And it's just incredible, like chronic anxiety, gone. Used to have lots of acne, clear skin. It's just, and nothing else changing, just listening to my body and listening to those nudges that didn't really make a lot of sense and seemed pretty fucking crazy. But I was like, I'm going to go for it anyway. And just, it's incredible how, all of that weight and that heaviness and those health issues just fall away on their own. And it's just being yourself. That's the key to the puzzle.
And how you showing up as yourself, Makhosi showing up as herself, me showing up as myself, it's a gift to ourselves, and it's a gift to anyone around us because it gives them permission. They see an example of somebody who's doing that fully expressed or in the process of continuously, evolving, becoming fully expressed. And they feel like, oh, it's safe for me to do that too. I know that I've never tried to copy anybody's path or their blueprint, but to see somebody showing up and trusting their highest self, that's very inspiring, So,
yeah. Or, also on the flip side, they could be triggered AF.
Yes.
And it actually catalyzes them too. And that's beautiful. So let's embrace all of it, that sometimes what we perceive as being bad, right? Like some of us, the thing that I hear the most is like, what if I'm too much? What if I'm too much? Or what if I'm not enough? And when you allow yourself to be fully expressed, you don't have to worry about those things because you're going to be just the right amount of you for those aligned people, for those aligned experiences and opportunities in life. And sometimes it shows up in ways that maybe aren't savory or what we want, but for the highest good.
It's such an interesting thing to talk about being too much or not enough. And it's like, what are we even basing that measurement off of? Like, what's the exact right amount of space to take up? What's the exact right amount of like you to be? That's so interesting. I think we don't fear being too much. We might need to reel it in sometimes, but I just think I love what you're saying and how, gosh, what did you say? That we're all an aspect of divinity? What did you say? It was, wow. I love that.
Yep.
I love that. Yep. So when you work with your elite clients, as you call them, you're like 1% and 2% clients, is this a big part of it? Is this, having like working on trusting their intuition, like stepping into their highest self? Is that like the core of the work, and or are there other abundance lessons that, weave in and out?
Yes. So this has been something that's really fascinated me, having the opportunity to be surrounded by some of the world's best. I mean, I've been so blessed to like teach the teachers and, work with I lead the leaders. And what I find so often is many of them, because they thought that freedom would come with the success, that they chased the success, that they chased the goals, that they became, disciplined, focused, they created a growth mindset, so on and so forth, in order to create that level of success. And then what happens, because they thought that that was their purpose, they get to that level, and either one of two things happens. Either now they're like, oh, well, now I want time freedom. And so their happiness becomes dependent on creating more time. But regardless of that, what they find out at the top, which was what I discovered for myself when I hit the top 2% of, I used to sell relationship enhancement products. I used to sell sex toys, and I was in the top 2% of that company. And I realized at the top that what I had done was created what my mind thought was success. And our mind can only copy what it's seen before. I was unknowingly copying someone else's definition of success in order to, make others happy. Sometimes clients, sometimes, parents, spouse, so on and so forth. But what I realized was that really the purpose of life is for us to experience euphoria in the journey. I sat and I thought about how many of our ancestors got to, quote unquote, do what they love. And the truth is probably not many on the surface. And so how was it that we have more depression, even though we're we have more money than they had, we have more freedoms than they had, even though things may not be great or perfect, for the most part, we are experiencing an improvement of what they experienced. And part of it was in how they were approaching their life. When you allow yourself to be expressed in all of the things that you do, that is the key to creating freedom, creating depth of connection, and creating real significance in the world. And so my message to everyone that I'm just like super amped to share is that we can not only create what I call a euphoric empire, which could be your amazing, 7-figure or 6-figure business. And you can also enjoy it now. Like, why are we trying to chase something outside of ourselves? And our happiness is dependent on hitting that goal. When we allow ourselves to love what we do now, that permeates everything, and life then gets to be fulfilling. That's when life gets to be in flow, right? And it gets to be both and. We get to have both.
Euphoric empire.
Euphoric empire.
I'm obsessed with that.
I know. I'm sort of buzzing just listening to you talk about it. We are, you know, especially, particularly in the United States, we are a culture of chase it, chase it, chase it. It's always a little bit ahead of you. Just keep, oh, you got this? Great. Don't stop and celebrate. Keep chasing. Keep going. And to sort of like, you know, close the gap and find reasons to, or close the loop and find reasons to celebrate constantly, find reasons to feel good, to bring, you know, I think, yeah, we're just a very forward thinking, but really right now is the forward you thought about a few years ago or even a few months ago. So it's like, we're already there.
I'm curious, since you work with these incredible elite clients, like what are some of the most exciting breakthroughs you've seen when you've sort of helped them slow down, come back into their body, be present? Like what has come of that that's been the most exciting?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I will just invite anyone. You're welcome to look, you know, like on my website or Instagram. I'm always sharing some of the like more tangible things that people get really excited, you know, to see someone create like $6 million in a year. That's pretty exciting. Yes. But the things that I get really excited about, because I know I can foresee the impact, is when they allow themselves to surrender more, when they allow themselves to let go of controlling everything. And oh my gosh, one of my favorite things to see is like when they begin to learn how to receive, because so many of them really struggle with receiving. It's like a huge topic that I'm always talking about. When they allow themselves to receive, it creates this depth of connection with their loved ones, with their friends, with new connections, because you know, they quote unquote say like, it's lonely at the top. And it's only really that way when you don't allow yourself to receive anymore out of fear, usually. But when they're like, oh my gosh, my relationship is the best it's ever been. Like, yes, business is amazing, but like, oh my gosh, I'm playing more. I'm lit up by what I'm doing. I actually walk away from my work with more energy. Or when they say like, I've gotten more done in the past like 2 weeks than I did in the previous 9 months, and I did less. That is when I'm like, all right, now we're into magic territory. And it's not so much about the dollars that come out. It's just like a fabulous byproduct. I know that's going to happen. It's just really a matter of time. But I love when I see them hitting those 3 key points, when they feel more freedom to be their full authentic self, when they feel deeper levels of connection than they've ever felt before, and they feel this knowing that they are creating significance, real legacy in the world, and not just chasing the next high from hitting their next financial goal or their next life goal that comes, and they hit it and it's amazing. They celebrate. And then 48 hours later, they're like, all right, now what next? And they're just forcing and hustling until they hit that one.
What's everybody's hang up with receiving? Why are so many of us uncomfortable or afraid to receive?
The thing that I see most often is we perceive receiving as weakness, as being vulnerable, and therefore not safe. So I would say this is a common theme, even with my higher level clients, and it's just a bigger game that they're playing. So it's just magnified. So many of us have had experiences where we thought maybe we could rely on someone, or we received someone's help And then, maybe we were betrayed, or maybe our team staged a coup and like ran off and left us hanging, right? And so we associate being vulnerable or receiving as not being safe, as not being secure. And so we have to begin to see how it actually makes us stronger, how we become more resilient, how we become more connected and more abundant when we allow ourselves to fully receive, not just like, okay, thank you. And then inside we're like totally tensing up and like rejecting that. I can tell so much about a person just by seeing how they receive a compliment. I can tell you probably about 10 different things that are happening in your life based off of how you receive a compliment and how that shows up in your body and how your energy shifts from that, because we're holistic beings.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Maybe that's a good place to start.
I was going to say, how do we practice receiving in the smaller ways so we can kind of work our way up to the big stuff?
Well, receiving simply in the mirror is a good place to start. We get very hung up sometimes on picking out everything that's wrong with us and harshly judging ourselves, and just standing in the mirror and allowing yourself to begin focusing on and saying out loud what it is that you love about yourself. And then fully receiving that, not going to a place where you have to justify it in some way, right? Like, you have the most beautiful smile. And then fully receiving that you have a beautiful smile, not justifying it with like, oh, and you're a nice person.
Right. Like, it's okay to be into your appearance because you're also really nice.
Yes. Like, it's okay to admire all the different aspects of you, even the ones that maybe aren't the most liked. Like, sometimes I have a sharp tongue, and allowing myself to receive that is an incredible gift to the right person. There are some people who are surrounded by yes men who never tell them the truth. And I can't help but to tell the truth. What an amazing gift. And so when people tell me that, I fully receive that. Thank you. Thank you. Like, that's amazing. And learning how to ask for help, even in small ways at home. Learning how to ask for help, even if you don't need help. Allowing the gift of another person getting to support you.
When you shared about the sharp tongue, I had this flashback to being in college, and like within a month I had 2 separate professors say like, wow, you're really strong-minded. And they didn't necessarily mean it like in the most positive. I mean, it wasn't an insult, but there was some layers to it because there was a way I wanted to do it. And looking back, I'm like, yes, I am. And that's why I get things done. And that's, what, it's like that. It's a gift to the right person. It's such a gift. I love that. I love that you shared that. That's great. I want to ask, okay, so again, with my research, I know you're a child that remembered your past life, or past lives. I want to ask about that. We have a big fascination with that. And then also like any esoteric, like, have you seen embodied spirits? Is that something you see on the daily? Do aliens visit you? What is it like to be you?
That's so funny because I get those kinds of questions a lot. To me, it's like so normal. But I forget that sometimes not everyone has those experiences. So yes, I came into this life remembering who I was the last time I was around. It was a little over 2,000 years ago. And I was a priestess in Egypt, specifically in the temple of Isis, as an oracle of Isis. And really, that's the role that I'm here again to do. I volunteered this time around to come back for this specific moment. And just fun little side note, I haven't talked about it publicly much, but I'm going to be visiting the temple in Egypt in less than 60 days. I'm super excited.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's going to be unbelievable. You're going to like have...
I have shivers.
So
I started
visions.
having shivers just when you said you were the Oracle of Isis, and now my body's like freaking out.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So more recently, because I had pieces and fragments of the memories, and now I've been getting more of like specific dates, specific names, and then some of them have like come into my awareness through just random things, just further confirming it. And so I'm excited because there was some energy that I left there the last time, and now I'm going to go there and I'm going to pick it up and integrate it and bring that out in the world again. So I'm very excited about it. As for seeing spirits, yeah. So as a child, I always saw entities. At first it was like animal spirits when I was very, very young. And I always, because I'm a very practical, logical person, I always, even as a kid, like talked myself out of it. It wasn't until my best friend's murder when I was 15. She appeared at the end of my bed, just as real as you and I, the night that they pulled the plug. And she showed up there and I was in total disbelief, and I'm like pinching myself and I'm blinking, trying to see like, wait, did I fall asleep? And then she laughed, but no sound came out. And then she told me telepathically, so her lips were not moving, there wasn't a sound, but she told me telepathically, I came to let you know that I'm okay and that I'm moving on, I'm transitioning. And that just, from that moment on, my life was never the same. I spent about a year mostly in silence from 15 to 16. That was my sophomore year. I didn't really speak. And that was when I kind of skipped over. I did used to also read tarot when I was like 12, 13. But that was when I really was like, oh, wow, there's something else here. Mm-hmm. And I began to see spirits of various kinds, and not just, sometimes it would be like ancestral, people who had passed on. But at this point, I don't interact with them as much as I do what people would call divinities, gods and goddesses at this stage. There's been so many. I wouldn't say that I always am seeing them on a day-to-day basis. Part of it has been because I had to learn how to turn it off because it was overwhelming to live that way. So now it's much more, it happens more when I'm opening it, when I'm activating that ability. And I love to be human as much as possible and like have the full human experience as much as I can. So I stay grounded as much as possible, but I do also know like I have the ability to access it whenever I I need to. And sometimes they come through and there's certain messages, there's certain things I need to share. There's certain things, sometimes they'll just be like, all right, we need you to say this. My name, Nejeser, even means the protector and advocate of the holy. And I take that like very, very seriously. So sometimes I do weird things. People are like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're a shaman. Why are you talking about money? And that came directly from the divinities. Like, the only way you are going to get these people's attention is to use the thing that they care about.
Wow.
So boom, we're going to give you some money. You're going to talk about money. It's going to come in. You're going to talk to them about the importance of having it so that they will listen to also the other stuff, the other deeper level components and pieces that really are important, but are hard to hear if you're not taken care of materially and distracted.
Do you think you love the human experience so much this time because when you were the Isis of Oracle, you didn't fully get that experience? Like, you're like, I'll come back, but I want to be superhuman this time?
Yeah. It's not lost on me at all that the thing I think people notice about me is I fully live life, even when it sucks. I love it. And part of that is because my soul is freed from reincarnation and because I volunteered to come. So I'm like, there's just like this deep level of knowing of the value of and the magic of getting to be human. Yeah. And wanting others to see how amazing it is. Like, when you're ugly crying, do you know how amazing it is that like this body has the ability to translate that emotion into like these different processes that then produce these tears out of your face? That's amazing. Anyway, not everyone gets it, but
I think at some level we all subconsciously get that though, because nobody ever sobs and then doesn't go to look in the mirror. Do you know what I mean? Like, we are like, and then we want to look at ourselves.
We're like, wow, that was really something.
Oh, look at me go.
Yes. And it's also like, that's why we love movies so much, right? Like, the more back and forth and the greater level of intensity, we love that. We just don't love it when it's happening to us. And so the more that we can envision our life almost like a movie, and that being human, like, that is what it is to be human, is to have the experience of both. And when you can fully accept duality, now you get to experience non-duality or transcendence, right? Or enlightenment, because you're not resistant. You're not focusing on either or. Now you're allowing for both and a higher level experience.
Wow. Yeah. I always try to appreciate that about my own grief, because I lost my mom about 6 years ago. And I'm like, wow, it sounds so weird, but I'm so much happier now because I appreciate life so much more. Like, the darker or the deeper you go into one end, you get to experience that opposite on the spectrum. Like, your spectrum of your human emotion and experience just keeps expanding the darker, deeper stuff you have to experience.
Yes.
There's such a range. I have to tell you, this is a little bit funny. So you have your beautiful past life memories. Sadie has a similar past life memory. Somebody, very high up in a group from somewhere. And so I went into a past life regression session with a great woman. And I was like, ooh, maybe I'll be royalty. I was a scullery maid. I cleaned a lot. I had a bucket. And I think that's why in this life, I'm like, we are not doing that again. And so I just loved, I was like, naturally, like, Egypt, and just this magical, like, I'm gonna have to take a tour of like Victorian houses in Virginia and be like, that's the one I cleaned.
I remember this one.
That's a lot of soot in that fireplace. I'm sorry, I'm so buzzing from how much I love this conversation that I'm like doing a little stand-up routine right now. I'm so sorry, but oh my gosh. So I guess, how should we tie this all up in a beautiful bow? I mean, it's been so amazing. I'm so grateful that is there anything else you want to impart on us or our listeners? Anything else that's channeling through you?
Our audience is very like either on the precipice of trusting themselves and diving into something new, or a lot of like newly entrepreneurial women like ourselves. Like, we're about a year and a half into our own journey. So from that point where it's like, I want to be the elite client of Makhosi the Royal Shaman someday, like, how do I embody that now? Like, where do I start?
Oh, that's such a good question, because I have seen such a need for it that I built out my business to be able to support those who maybe they're not at that level yet, but I believe that by taking some of that and embodying it now, that we can have an incredible life. So I actually work with clients of all different levels, but it's really more about the mindset and the way that you're viewing life. So the thing that I invite everyone to explore is to ask yourself, number one, what is the goal that I have, right? Is it a 6-figure business, 7-figure business? Like, what is that? And then what is it that you get to experience when you have that? What is it that you think that having the 6-figure business is going to get you, or the 7-figure business is going to get you? And then allow yourself to begin integrating that now. So if you believe that, when I create a 6-figure business, I'm going to have more freedom to, I don't know, what's coming to mind right now. Okay, for me, I've been belly dancing again. When I have that level, I'll have the freedom to belly dance more. Well, by belly dancing more now, that helps you tap into your creativity. And then that is actually what's going to create that 6-figure business, right? And so embodying that next level now actually allows for it to begin coming in a much easier way. I say, as a human being, part of it is that we experience struggle, but you get to choose. Do you want your life to be a struggle, or do you want to choose from your mind, what are you facing, and then choose to lean into that struggle, which then makes your life much easier. But you get to decide which one you want.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Where can our listeners find you and connect with you and become obsessed with you in a healthy way?
The best place usually to find me is on the Instagrams. I'm at the Royal Shaman on Instagram. And also we are going to be getting back onto YouTube. So
yay, can't wait.
Also very soon we'll have some new YouTube videos coming out. So you can also find me. I'm at the Royal Shaman everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or my website, theroyalshaman.com.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This was such an enlightening conversation for us, and we can't wait for our listeners to learn and grow from this as well.
Yes, thank you so much. This was such a treat. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I absolutely loved it, and I wish both of you amazing abundance and incredible magic for your podcast going forward.
Thank you. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.